So with the SGDQ run done by Sikinar recently, there's been a lot of new people. I think it would be a good idea to have a one-stop video that goes over what I consider everything you need to know to start running this game. So I want to say what this video won't be. It won't be a hand-holding tutorial. This is meant to supplement you watching a full run, whether that is the SGDQ run or a previous run on the leaderboard by me or someone else. The reason why I'm doing this video in that format is not only because I can make a much briefer and shorter video, but also because it's in my opinion that you'll be a much better and consistent player of the game in the long run if you experiment and try to figure out these tricks for yourself. So rather telling you exactly what you need to do, I'm going to be explaining the main tricks and why they work, and it's up to you to go and find what strategy is most consistent for you, what you like the best. Maybe that'll be copying someone else, maybe it won't be. The important thing is that a new player is trying something new that might result in a completely new skip, that might be a faster, more consistent way. As a new runner, you have completely fresh eyes to the game, and that is probably the most valuable thing you can have to making a speedrun faster or more consistent. So something you'll probably hear a lot about this game is its likelihood of crashing, soft locking, hard locking, whatever you want to call it. It's worth noting that almost all of these crashes are out of your control despite what some people may tell you. So it's really not worth beating yourself up and saying, oh, I should have did such and such differently and then I wouldn't have crashed, because chances are that's not true. However, there are some ways that you can consistently crash the game. If you go too high while hovering into War Factory, it can crash. If you go behind the Rescue Fortress door before it loads, it'll crash. If you watch the Ashland cutscene at Explore Palace and you do it the way that we do it in runs, the fastest way, it will always crash. There is a way to prevent that, but it's slower, so avoid the cutscene. But other than those examples, I can't say that there are any other consistent crashes that happen because of user error. So the first thing I want to talk about is loading zones. The way the game achieves a seamless world is by requiring you to hit triggers to load the next area. So if you skip a trigger, you won't load the next area. The most obvious example of skipping loading triggers is right at the beginning of the game. If you go too far to the right of the left blue light on the computer, you'll find that the next area doesn't load. If you go over that light or to anywhere to the left of it, then the next area will load instead. So when you're first learning the game and you're trying to copy other runs, if you find that areas aren't loading and you don't know why, the very first thing you should suspect is I'm skipping a loading trigger, and you need to go back and very closely watch where they go and compare that to what you actually did. I'm showing off what I think are the most likely to encounter missed triggers for a new player, which are Lifeseek Ghost Town, Talk to Brooder, Tombstone Room, and Escape. But there are obviously more, and especially in different categories. So conserving your ammo isn't as important as it used to be, but it's still important to keep in mind. The way the game drops ammo is on a priority basis with Peacemaker at the lowest, meaning it's very unlikely you'll get a Peacemaker drop until you're full on the other 3 guns. So I already showed it off a little bit, but Ghost Towns, while it's only used in a few spots in the route, is a pretty important thing to understand how they work. So the way a Ghost Town works is by hitting a certain trigger on your way out of the level, you'll load in the city and its triggers, so you'll get a fully functioning Haven City without the guards, civilians, and vehicles. So once again, another trick that goes back into understanding loading zones, and this is not something that works leaving every single area. So there are a lot of jetboard tutorials out there, but this is all you need to know.
You can jump on your jetboard. You can get a higher jump by ducking before you jump. Jump and
The only thing I'll add to that I wish people told me was you need to let go of R1 to consistently get side flips. You don't hold it the whole way through. You perform an extended front flip by doing an L1 up trick followed by an R1 up trick. I think it's still worthwhile to learn even though it's not used that much because it teaches you jetboard control. I would recommend learning it at LifeSeed Stationary, then with some speed, and then to do this one at Mountain Temple, which you do one side flip from the portal, nothing after that, and if you can make it across, you've mastered it. So this is going to be my hover tutorial, and I'm going to try and keep it as brief as possible and tell you how I think you should learn the trick. So this diagram is meant to represent your analog stick. You can choose to start the hover at any of the 45-degree angles or, in this picture, the yellow dots. There is a generous buffer around these spots, so you don't have to obsess about getting it perfectly up left or up right. But for example, if you do pick up right, then you have to rotate from there to up. You can't rotate down. Once you've figured out which way you want to move your analog stick, just start out by just focusing on getting the hover to actually activate. Just jump without touching your analog stick, press and hold L1, then move your analog stick to, for example, upright, and then rotate to up while still holding L1. It should be very obvious when you get the hover to work. If you're moving the analog stick up, you'll have a very familiar sound, and if you're moving it down there won't be a sound, but you should still feel that you got it. Once you've mastered activating the hover, all you have to do is, as soon as you get that first hover, you begin mashing L1 and still holding your analog stick up or down. The most common problem is trick canceling. If you hear a sound and Jack kind of falls down to the ground, it's because you weren't holding L1. If you jump and you just do the L1 trick, it's because you were too far to the left or right. Try being more upright or up left or whatever direction. Zoomer boosting is only used a couple times in any percent at the very beginning. Right here, to do yellow barrier skip, it's a very small zoomer boost, only with the L1 jump, but you can do much higher if you combine it with changing hover zones to get over walls, and that's used a lot in other categories. All an ABBA bounce is doing a ground pound on a slippery surface and pressing X when Jack finally hits the ground. A great place to practice this is at the Jetboard Stadium, and I thought I'd throw in the idea of sloped wall climbing, which is basically if you jump and you spin on a wall that's slightly curved, you'll get a little bit more height. This isn't really used anywhere anymore except for in Jack 1. So the first Jack 2 any percent specific strat is Mars Tomb Skip. It's not that hard after you get used to it, but it's pretty difficult at first. All you do is you need to pull back and drive forward and jump before you hit the curve. And then you need to jump again and then jump out of the zoomer. Once you do that, you just roll jump, uppercut, whatever you want to do into the thing. And make sure that you punch into the door so you hit the loading trigger before you reset. So left tomb skip is next. First thing you have to do, jump a little bit to get a tiny bit of height, then do a single jump and a spin, and you'll always make it up that ramp. Once again, going back to loading triggers, if you don't go far enough under the main tomb door, the spider egg and cutscene won't load as a result. This is very obvious when this happens. Getting into that room in the normal any percent route requires a water roll jump at a somewhat precise location. If you're too far to the right, you'll have your momentum killed. If you're too far to the left, you won't make it. But once you get used to the right spot, it shouldn't be a problem anymore. There are only 6 combinations of tombstones, but depending on which pattern set you use, it'll change which one you start at. My pattern set always starts at the back left tombstone. So that first tombstone was 311, so I had to hit another tombstone and listen to that one, and that was 133. So then I knew exactly which pattern I had. A great way to practice tombstones is level select to Mars Tomb, then complete the tombstones, don't hit the button, and then you can keep dying and the tombstones will come back up. And you can practice them until you're familiar with all the different note patterns. The patterns are correct. The main goal in the Praxis fight is to hit him with more than 4 bombs per phase so it rolls over to the next phase. Sometimes no matter how well you play this, you still won't get that 5th hit. A lot of this is due to the fact that your fate is in the hands of the fuse timers of the bombs, and sometimes they just don't work out. Here I do pretty bad, but I still actually get the 5 hit. So the way Rescue Worker Storage works is we activate the mission, but we don't complete it. As long as we don't die in either of these 2 missions, when we come back into the city, workers will still be active and we can reset back to the beginning of the mission, which was at Brooder. The reason why this saves time is because we're now able to finish workers closer to the beginning of Class 1 race, saving us travel time. If you're a new player and you think you're going to die anyway, you should still go for this, because as long as you haven't achieved it in your PB, you'll only lose around 10 or 13 seconds being forced to drive all the way back to Brooder. So you should always go for it, especially if you haven't done it before. The way the skip at the end of War Factory works is we're essentially forcing the game to load in the elevator and the corresponding death plane so we can die and get the checkpoint to go to the top of the elevator, thereby skipping this mission. It doesn't actually complete. We get percentage warped to crew. So all you have to do is partially load the elevator. The easiest way to know you did that is to open all 3 robots. Then you need to hover up to where the guards are, ground pound down, and then hover up, causing the elevator to open again, which loads the death plane in, which causes you to die. If you screw it up, you shouldn't give up, because you can sometimes hover near the elevator from the ground and you'll still get the death. So underport skip is a pretty major skip to learn, as it's basically the last roadblock to completing a run. All you have to do is go close enough to the door, then walk away and punch board. As soon as you punch board, the city should deload, and then you just need to go close enough to the airlock and hover your way to the end elevator. You don't want to go too close or the door can open and you'll get stuck. If you're at the bottom and you go too far away from the airlock, then it won't load in the rest of the level. However, it is a myth that if you go too close to the elevator, you'll hit the wall. You can see that as long as I do 2 side flips, I will never hit the wall. However, if you're not comfortable enough doing 2 side flips and you just need to jump from further back, or else you will hit the wall. And of course, something can always go wrong that you've never seen before. If you'd like to see a more in-depth guide on underport skip, and I think he did a video on left tomb skip, then you should check out Sikinar's videos. A lot of those links and links to tombstone patterns and everything like that, it'll be in the description. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask in the comments or to join the Discord and ask the question in the Jak2 channel there. Even if the question might have already been addressed in the video, still don't be afraid to ask. The last thing that I would want to say is that if you choose to end up running this game, you should expect the game to crash, you should expect things to go wrong, and you should expect that you're not going to get everything perfect the first time. And then hopefully the game doesn't crash as much as you thought it would, you get much more faster times than you thought you would, and you continue iterating on your runs and getting better and better.